Good afternoon and welcome to a special Angry Alien Bulletin. I'm coming to you from a hotel in Colchester, which is in Suffolk in the southeast of the United Kingdom, about an hour away from an airbase called RAF Lakenheath, although it's a bit of a misleading name because it's not an RAF base for the most part. About 90% or even more of the personnel on the base are actually Americans. And this is where a great deal of supposed drone activity has been taking place. Although, after having seen a lot of what's happening here for myself, and rather surprised that I got an opportunity to witness some of this in person, well, I have some serious doubts as to whether or not the phenomena that have been appearing above this base are indeed drones. Some unquestionably are. However, some do not appear to be drones at all. And the strange thing about it all is the fact that the base doesn't seem to be reacting to them, at least not in the way that one would expect if you were trying to ensure the security of a top secret facility like this. And meanwhile, across the Atlantic, there have been many similar sightings of these orb-like UFOs. Indeed, it seems to be a bit of an outbreak, and a lot of this has been captured on camera from Arizona to Washington, D.C. to New York. A lot of these strange orb-like craft, or whatever you might want to call them, UAPs, that have been appearing both at night and in broad daylight. And also in an airport in Manchester, where a spherical UFO just appeared on the runway, on the tarmac, or rather hovering just over the tarmac. And when it was approached by a security vehicle, it shot up into the sky. I'll tell you, I would be less inclined to believe all of this stuff and would chalk some of this up to sort of a shared frenzy, a shared level of excitement driven by all of these stories on the internet, leading people to believe that they've seen something similar. If I didn't see all of this footage, number one. Number two, if I hadn't seen it for myself. Reverse course. It's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a plane of some kind, but man, now it's going up. What the hell? Okay, that's definitely a drone of some kind. Keeps changing its trajectory. God damn, that poor guy. He left just at the wrong time. So last night at RAF Lakenheath, my patience was rewarded, although not in the way I suppose that I would have wanted it to be, because I am almost certain that I spotted a drone last night. But when I mentioned somebody having left at the wrong time, it was actually a member of the British mainstream media. I'm not going to name which company he was with, but he had been there for several consecutive nights ever since Thursday. And he told me that he had seen all sorts of unusual things, including enormous amounts of activity that didn't look like this obvious drone. And the reason that I'm saying this is a drone, it may not be very apparent to those who are looking at it right now, is because it kept changing its trajectory in mid-air in a way that aircraft definitely cannot do, but in a way that drones definitely can. And I have seen similar drones in operation at the Rocket Factory Augsburg's facilities at Saxevord in Shetland, so this, I'm sure, was a drone, although it absolutely should not have been there. This is a drone-free area. It's against the law to fly drones in this region, and it didn't appear to be any part of a military activity. Indeed, the base was completely blacked out and largely inactive that night. And I got curious. I knew that there was a road available to me in the vicinity of where this drone appeared to be hovering, so I drove over into that area looking for the drone operators, and after 2 passes down the back road, I caught sight of the drone again, cut down a road leading to where this drone might have been operated from, and the moment my headlights swung in the direction of the drone and it was obvious that my car was heading in that direction, the light went out on the drone. It completely vanished from sight in midair. And although this was an intriguing experience, it didn't even begin to compare with the experiences that I had had the previous night. But before we get to that, we need to talk about everything else that's been happening in the world, because there appears to be a UFO breakout occurring everywhere in the world, especially in the United States and Britain. So we'll start in the American Southwest with what was originally identified as a single object with lots and lots of lights, but I kind of question this, assuming, of course, that this is not some sort of CGI creation. This looks like a swarm of UAPs, and incidentally, it is very similar to the swarm that was described to me by an eyewitness at RAF Lakenheath. The whole frenzy around the so-called drone incidents taking place at this base all kicked off when a swarm of approximately 50 UAPs came in over what is called the Wash, which is a bay in the southeast of England, just north of Cambridge, and a bit to the northwest of this RAF base. And these 50 or so UAPs allegedly made a beeline for RAF Lakenheath and passed brazenly over the base and then vacated the area very quickly, again covering a distance of 50 to 60 kilometers, and that is something that normal drones anyway, the drones that the average user might be able to acquire, simply cannot do. A very advanced drone kit capable of operating at a distance of about 3 kilometers away from the user runs at least $12,000 to $13,000. So we're talking 50 drones that are capable of flying with impunity over the British countryside for a much greater distance than that, passing over a facility that is highly secure and has considerable ground-to-air and air-to-air combat capabilities, and just leaving the area. Very, very difficult to imagine that something like this could have been done by anybody except a highly advanced military force or something else, something perhaps a bit more advanced. And this was just the first of a series of events that have taken place for over a week or so over the base, and every eyewitness that I have spoken to, including professional journalists who have witnessed what's been going on in this region, all of them have testified that this is unlike anything they have ever seen before, including people who have lived in the region for decades. So in any event, we've got this particular incident, which again, very, very strange what was happening here. Somewhere in Arizona, I think it was over Phoenix, but to be honest, I'm not entirely certain. These events seem to kind of jumble together for me. Again, this could be some sort of sophisticated drone type of operation. It's a rather impressive little display, but what's even more impressive is the brazen daylight orb UAP encounters that have been taking place as well. For example, this particular UAP that was captured by a Fox News helicopter. You'll just see it zoom by to the bottom left of your screen. Very, very strange, and again, it caught the Fox News team completely off guard. Now, some observers, such as Dr. Avi Loeb, have chalked this incident up to some sort of lens flare or some sort of reflection on the canopy of the helicopter as it was in motion. But man, this was a dramatic moment with a great deal of motion on the part of whatever this reflection, if that's what it was. Well, it moves very quickly. If this were a reflection, I would expect it to be the result of a rapid turn on the part of the helicopter, but instead it's just proceeding at a straight and predictable trajectory over the river, and we see this rather dramatic movement on the screen. It's just, I don't know. I don't buy it, to be honest. And incidentally, something else that was initially chalked up to being lens flares or reflections were these objects over Washington, D.C., and that explanation was quickly debunked when additional footage surfaced all over the internet from different camera angles. Obviously, you're not going to have reflections of the same objects from different perspectives and different cameras. Oh, wait a minute. There's a fifth object, and incidentally, I saw the same phenomena occurring over RAF Lakenheath a number of times, where these objects would appear and disappear, sometimes be very bright, then fade from view. And this is another orb UAP sighting that took place very recently, just a few days ago. This one in North Carolina over a Duke nuclear power plant. And there could be a connection between this sighting and the Lakenheath sightings as well, because in RAF Lakenheath, it is rumored that nuclear weapons are about to return to the facility. Indeed, nuclear-capable cruise missiles may have already been delivered. And in the past, UAPs have a history, dating all the way back to the 1980s and perhaps even before that, of being attracted to nuclear facilities, especially facilities that are using nuclear weapons, sometimes demonstrating the capability of deactivating these weapons during a sighting. Again, difficult to say if there is a clear connection, but very interesting indeed to see similar events taking place over facilities that either are confirmed to have fissile materials in them or may have fissile materials delivered sometime in the near future. Now, UFO skeptics will commonly ask, as is the case with this particular sighting that also happened in Arizona, if these are the products of extraterrestrial civilizations, why would they make them so obvious? Why put such bright lights on these objects if they're trying to observe us covertly? Well, it could be a function of their propulsion systems. As I mentioned in a video about MHD or magnetohydrodynamic propulsion, this is a process that ionizes the air around the craft and manipulates it in order to provide lift. And in the process of this ionization, you would have a glowing effect at night, perhaps even a subtle glowing effect during the day as well. So they may not really have much of a choice while these things are in operation. While they are hovering or while they are in motion, these objects would have to glow based on the nature of the technology in use. Again, that's just a theory, but it's one that makes sense. What doesn't make sense to me is military drones using extremely obvious lights. That doesn't make any sense to me at all as to why military drones on any sort of operation would want to be so visibly obvious to observers on the ground. But all of this would be a lot less convincing to me if I hadn't seen so many strange things for myself at RAF Lakenheath, especially on Friday night. The entire base was lit up like a Christmas tree, and apparently this was the case on Thursday also, which incidentally was Thanksgiving Day, a day when the base was supposed to be inactive, and yet there was a frenzy of activity at this base, and for good reason, because there were so many lights passing back and forth over the base or in close proximity to the base, or what appeared to be high above the base at a considerable altitude. So I wasn't able to get all of this stuff on camera, unfortunately. It was incredibly cold, incredibly windy, just a very difficult condition to film under, and also I don't think my camera was best suited for filming at this time of night. But I did get some things, and I can at least relate to you my experiences as well. One of these objects at the horizon definitely appears to be a plane or drone of some kind, but then we have another object that appears to be a more consistent and solid light that fades in and out of view, very much like some of these other objects that we have seen that appear and disappear periodically. And it looked like we had one object chasing another. And incidentally, if you're wondering why these shadowy things appear at the sides and corners of the image blocking your view, well, it's because I was filming through the gaps in a chain link fence so I could get a clearer view of what was happening at the horizon. Again, all of this was very, very odd. These objects just didn't seem to be moving quite fast enough to be aircraft, and again, if they were drones, the wind was so strong that night. That's just something that isn't very healthy for most drones. Very difficult to operate drones in high winds, which was definitely something that was happening that night. Now, what you're watching right now is obviously an aircraft, and I'm including it here to give you an idea of the intensity of the activity around the airbase on Friday night, because this plane was flying around the base almost constantly as if it was on some sort of patrol. It was a turboprop plane. You could tell that very obviously from the noise. But then, shortly after spotting that plane, I spotted this thing. And again, it shakes all over the place. It was freezing, it was windy, and also I have to admit I was rather excited. It doesn't appear to be much if you look at it in this particular image, but the way it appeared in person was quite amazing. It was a big bright light tracking across the sky, very much like a satellite, except about 2/3 of the way through the flight it stopped behaving like a satellite. It essentially stopped and hovered for a considerable period of time, and then my attention was drawn away from it for a second, and then it just kind of disappeared, as you can see, and then reappeared for a while, and then disappeared again for good later on during my observations. Again, satellites were everywhere in the sky that night, which is a very common thing shortly after sundown. The angle of sunlight shortly after sundown strikes the solar panels on satellites at exactly the right angle to make them quite brilliant and obvious in the early evening sky. So you're going to see lots of satellites, but something that was pointed out to me by a local who had seen these things over and over again were the things that looked like satellites but stopped moving like satellites. Their trajectories would change, they would disappear and reappear, all kinds of odd phenomena that simply do not happen with conventional satellites. This was such a strange collection of events and phenomena occurring over this base. Again, unlike anything I have ever seen before, and I've been an amateur astronomer since I was in my early teens. So what are we seeing here? Well, some of it is doubtlessly drone-type activity. Based on what I saw last night, that is to say Saturday night on the 30th of November, that was unquestionably a drone that I saw. And interestingly enough, the operators brought their drone down immediately the moment they thought that they were under some kind of observation or that there might have been a police officer heading in their direction. But as far as the the rest of this is concerned, I am left rather perplexed, and I have to say, quite intrigued. And so as everybody else who was out there, and by the way, there were numerous observers, most of whom were local and all of whom were completely mystified themselves, but there were several different types of objects, in my opinion, that were in operation over the airbase that night as well. There were definitely fighter planes that I spotted. There were also definitely things that looked like drones, although I have to admit I question whether some of these would be drones in the high wind conditions that existed on this particular night. And then we had these high altitude things that looked like satellites but didn't behave like satellites. And I didn't just see one of those, I saw several, some of which again were pointed out to me by a local who had spent a lot of time observing these things. And again, I have a huge amount of experience in watching satellites. It's something I really like to do. I know what satellites look like, and I know how they behave, and I actually saw quite a number of satellites that night, again reflecting just how many satellites are operational in low Earth orbit these days because of Starlink and other constellations that are going up. But still, several different types of craft were in operation over the airbase, and right now, neither the British nor the US military is talking about what they might be. But what is generating the most talk right now is this bizarre spherical object that was allegedly photographed by a commercial airline pilot at Manchester Airport. And as you can see in this computer-enhanced image, it is hovering over the tarmac. It is not sitting on the tarmac. And supposedly, this object was the size of a small car. And when it was approached by a security vehicle, understandably curious as to what the hell it might have been, it rocketed up into the sky at a very high velocity. Again, the type of sudden acceleration that one would expect with a type of propulsion similar to magnetohydrodynamic propulsion, or MHD. Again, if you're interested in that, I have a video on the topic linked at the end of this one. We don't know the identity of the pilot who took the photograph. He said that he didn't want to be identified. He didn't want either himself or his family to be harassed or bothered. He just wanted to get the news out there. And then he deleted, or somebody deleted, the Twitter account associated with these photographs. But the photographs have been analyzed by a number of pretty experienced experts in the field of CGI, and according to them, they look genuine. Doesn't look pixelated, doesn't look computer generated. And some of the conceptual art that's emerged of this sphere and what it might look like in great detail, well, I have to admit, very, very intriguing. Something that bears some resemblance to the spherical spacecraft that were utilized by alien conquerors in a TV show called Colony. Let's hope that this is nothing like that, because I'll tell you, the world or universe that was portrayed in the show Colony was a horrible, horrible universe indeed, at least for the future of the human species. In any event, I will keep you up to date on any new developments that occur with what is happening with UAPs, either here in the UK or elsewhere. Also, if you want to see the complete unedited footage of everything I captured on Friday and Saturday night during my visit to RAF Lakenheath, well, all the details are in the description. And also, if you'd like to support trips like this, because I had to stay in a hotel for a couple of nights, not an expensive trip, but still, if it's something you'd like to support, all the details are also in the description. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, stay angry about space.